Hey everyone, welcome to Unjustified Beliefs, the podcast in which we talk about our beliefs and we try to validate them using philosophy, psychology, and maths. Today on the show, we'll be talking about an alternate lifestyle to our corporate 9 to 5 job. And on the show today, we have Shaurya Srivastav, Karthik Kannan, Jyoti Dugar. First of all, I would like to thank you for listening and following us for the last 4 months. And I'm really looking forward to your inputs on the beliefs you would like to test on this podcast. So message us or just write a comment on this channel on YouTube on the beliefs you would like to test or care about in the future episodes. I want to jump into the main discussion and ask this question to everyone. What does freedom means to you? Everybody would have a different definition of freedom. So let's start with our guest today, Shaurya Srivastav, and what is his definition of freedom?
Thank you, Saransh, for introducing me here. And for me, freedom is all about sort of having my time as freely available as possible. My schedule should be in a manner where I feel I can get the maximum out of life. To me, it's really important to feel alive and feel free. So, feeling alive and feeling free to me is just getting the maximum out of life in terms of potential and having my schedule as free as possible. So, that's how I personally look at freedom from a very emotional point of view.
More time to yourself is your definition of freedom.
Right. More time to myself to pursue things that I really like, hobbies that I really like, or things that I really want to work on.
Cool. And that's why you decided to make the switch. And we'll talk more about the switch in a while. So let me ask Jyoti and Karthik, what are your definition of freedom?
Hey, hi. So, freedom of time, definitely. Freedom of choice is also something which is, I think, as important to me. Like being able to decide what I want to do when. And I guess that's it. Freedom of time and choice. Both are equally important to me because I like, first of all, I like spending time with myself a lot, find myself very interesting. So, yeah, things on myself, by myself, reading, watching things which I like, or anything or learning as well. So I like to have that time dedicated to myself. So I need freedom of time and freedom of choice, both.
Just a follow-up question on that. What is the time in a week where you feel you're mostly free? Is it during the week itself? Is it especially on the weekends? Is it in the evenings, or you feel like your entire life you are free to do whatever you want to
I
do?
think, yeah, since last year, it's been the weekends for sure. Otherwise, earlier it used to be weekends. You have to meet someone, you have to do this, you have to do that, or you have to catch up on your house chores. But since last year, I think weekend is the time when you're really
And that is a limitation with the corporate life we follow. There is a reason we do that, and we'll talk about it again in a while. Now, finally, coming to Karthik, what is your definition of freedom?
As you guys were talking about freedom, I was having thoughts of about the same thing in my head, like the freedom to do what I want, and when I basically freedom of choice and time, right? But then I thought that was if I was being too idealistic and sort of like, even if I'm doing what I want, that doesn't mean I won't have commitments, right? Doesn't mean I'll be free to do whatever I want. There will still be commitments to do. So maybe freedom for me means I get to decide my commitments. Like I get to decide what makes me less quote unquote free in terms of time and choice, that sort of stuff.
This is definitely a philosophical debate, and we can start with the definition of freedom, which is freedom of choice is what we're looking for, but in any case, you will be bounded by some responsibilities and you have to choose your struggles, as they say. So, let me come to this point. Shaurya here has made a choice about moving away from a normal 9 to 5 structure to a more self managed, self regulated lifestyle. So, Shaurya, can you talk a bit about it and what made you make this change into the lifestyle you're currently living?
Sure. Yeah, I think, working over the years, being obsessed with sort of being free and feeling alive, right, to me was freeing up as much time as possible. Initially, started looking for jobs where I could really have jobs. Could I work 6 hours a day? Could I find jobs where I can work 5 hours a day? Are there really jobs like that? Was the initial, search or was the initial pursuit? Because that way that I could still earn some money from my job and actually have time as well. But then I soon realized that such concepts rarely exist, especially in India, right? So I think then I was really sort of forced to, find ways to make the switch. And about 6 months ago, I did make that switch of deciding to leave my full-time job. Yeah, so making that switch happened about 6 months ago, and currently, if I look at my current schedule, I'm sort of working approximately 3 to 4 hours a day on my job of being a full-time trader. So currently I'm a full-time trader. I sort of spend 3 to 4 hours a day, and I'm pretty much free from about 1:30 p.m. every single day. And I absolutely love that. I absolutely love the fact that 1 p.m. is when I literally go have lunch from a point knowing that my whole day is free from now on. So that, in a nutshell, is how my schedule looks currently, and that's what I've actively worked towards achieving. That 9 to 1 is what my timings are at the moment. So yeah, we can of course break it down as we continue speaking.
Interesting. And Karthik, before this, you raised a very interesting question about how actually we work in a 9 to 5 job. So, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how many hours do you actually, or do we actually work in a 9 to 5 job? I would say, yeah, if you remove the food time and the chatter time and other time, it would come down to 4 to 5 hours effective.
Yeah, for the listeners, to rephrase the question, like the question was how, out of the 8 hours that are quote unquote assigned to you in a corporate work day, how many effective hours do you really end up working? So, and like you said, Saransh, like after you factor out all of the other stuff, even if you factor out the lunch and the other chatter, like when you're, how productive are you really? Like if you didn't have to work the 9 to 5 and you could work, say, from, if someone was 6 to 10 a.m., he or she was most productive, and then after that the next time they find their energy is from 5 to 9 p.m., would they achieve the same or would they achieve more? My argument here was they would achieve more. And in a 9 to 5 job, you're really just working, like Shaurya said, like 9 to 1 is probably how, when you are most productive. After that is like you already, there's a point where you're ramping up, you're ramping down, you're figuring out the day. Whereas if you focus all of that energy and you don't fill up the space, so to speak, maybe you can be more productive, you can be happier. That's the question I keep asking myself as well.
Karthik, I think you're talking more about having the flexibility to work in a day whenever you want, but you are still talking about working for 8 to 10 hours.
Both. Yeah, I was talking about both components. Like, yeah, there are two arguments to that. Like, when you work
Mhm.
and how much you work are two different things. Like, but yes, I was talking about both things. What do you think about
Mhm.
both of them?
Okay. I think it depends a lot from job to job. It varies because in my job, usually it's never like, I have to work from 9 to 5. It's usually it's a consulting sort of job. So it highly depends on which who is my customer at that point of time. So then it depends a lot on which time zone they are in. And sometimes I'm working very early in the morning, or sometimes I'm just starting late and working very late in the morning. And similarly, it has happened that some days I've worked for more than 10 to 12 hours, but some days I've also worked less than 8 hours. I don't know if everyone's job is like this. I'm sure it's not. So I'm just lucky to, or unlucky to not have the same life day in and day out. I don't know. I've never experienced a proper 9 to 5 job. So one thing I do wonder is that would I like the 9 to 5 job, because I've had a very like an unstable schedule. It changes a lot. Is there anything good about the 9 to 5? I'm not sure. I just thought I'd drop in another point before the thing between working. I just feel like having a corporate job instead of 9 to 5. I'll say corporate job, and having a job and doing it independently. I feel that the job takes care of a lot of things for you, and you don't have to depend on yourself for everything. Plus, you don't have to be the most disciplined person, because I think working independently, discipline is very important. And I think the job takes care of a lot of those things which free up time actually to do the work and other things if possible.
I just want to say something on those lines around the topics that Jyoti has mentioned. So the thing is, like, one thought which was always there in me, and something which is very core to my thoughts, was that many times I noticed, right? We in at least I'm in analytics. I'm in the field of analytics, so many times I noticed that a lot of people used to like spread their work from a Monday to Friday in such a manner that they still have something to do on each day. And I used to wonder, why can't we squeeze it a little tighter, right? And I'll do the same amount of work on 5 days within four. I can do it in three. I can, maybe I can stretch, maybe I can do a lot of things, but maybe I don't need to sit 8 hours on each day, right? 8, 9 hours, whatever the average work hour may be, depending on place to place. And I was like, why is there no option where I do my Fridays work? Because I've noticed on Fridays, half the people are anyway having really low productivity. Right? Why is there no option where you're going to spend, where you're maybe doing 4 hours of work or 3 hours sometimes on a Friday? Just an example. Why can't I squeeze that into my Thursday or Wednesday and give my Friday off? Right? I'm still doing the same amount of work. I'm still earning the company the same amount of income or business. I was really mind boggled by some of these things. And these are core thoughts that I've always had. That way, I get more time for myself. I've still done justice to my job, and I've done a great job, in fact. So, speaking of productivity, these are some of the thoughts that I've really had to question. Why is it that my weekend is only considered free time? Why is it that I can't squeeze Friday's work back into a Thursday? Just thought call that up.
Yeah, that's a really good thing that you bring up. And I feel that inherent to that, though, is the assumption that you have the ability to do that. Like when you were working a 9 to 5, it was in a tech sector, right?
Yeah.
And I think the rest of us are in the tech sector as well. And I feel like as the tech sector, I was mentioning this right before the podcast in our conversation, but yeah, I was saying that it resembles art in a lot of ways because we work in silos. We don't interact with a lot of people. Our work really doesn't depend on a lot of things, so we are actually free to work when we want to if we actually decide to do so. Whereas for someone like a banker or a doctor who has their day will revolve
Yeah.
around patients or customers, and they probably do not have the freedom to say that, okay, I'm not going to work from, or I will come in at 6 a.m. or I will not work
Yeah.
from say, 10 to 12 because their work revolves around customers, patients, people who need.
Yeah. So exactly, man. That's exactly the same thought I had. We are not mostly, I guess, a lot of people are not part of these customer-facing roles or front-end roles, if I may call them. I don't need to answer a customer at 9 a.m. Right? Like, why don't I just finish my work for the next day, which is 4 hours of work left? I'll wrap it up now and give me my day off tomorrow. And I used to crave for that. And yeah, so that's exactly what I'm talking about. It totally resonates here.
I'm just looking at the other side of the coin. Like the company, unfortunately, works in a way that you have to like coordinate with a lot of other people, and there'll be requests coming in at different times. So there can be a sudden request which can come in at Friday 3 p.m. and you consider that time to be your free time, and you have almost completed all your responsibilities. But so that is, I think, the current restraint. And okay, let's, before I dig deep into that specific point, I just want to mention that I think the idea of this 9 to 5 came through the Industrial Revolution, where the workers have to work on a certain time, and after that you're free, not going to be called back. But now we are in a digital age, and we are always connected through our phone and laptops, and anybody can just ping us and ask us to work on a file or a report. That freedom is completely lost now. Like, that this time you cannot disturb me. Any time the boss can ring you up, and productivity is measured differently. Expectations are just way too different. So from that era to here, a lot of practices didn't evolve. And given the context as what you guys were talking about, that we are in a role where we have luckily the freedom to change our work structure in a way to produce the same output. But this is where the problem lies, where as our responsibility, we could be called in to solve a crisis at a time where we think our job was usually completed. So if that is the reason that we have that 9 to 5 structure.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. I like to use the word the system, right? So I think, yes, we are part of a system where, yes, the corporate system where, yes, you have to be available at a certain time in case something comes up, right? And yes, I understand that if, let's say, yes, if I had a company and yes, it would not be easy to provide that kind of freedom that I previously mentioned. Yes, so being part of that system as an employee definitely means that, yes, you got to be available. And I understand that, yes. And from a very practical sense, I'm saying that, yes, as an employee, you got to be available in case something comes up. So you would even show up on a day where you don't have too much work on it, right? But yeah, I guess that's the dichotomy, right? But as an individual, I really want that time for myself. And if I could find a way to do it, I personally would.
Interesting. And the second question to you, Shaurya, and to everyone else, what do you think are the major challenges when you're trying to make that jump? Like how difficult is it to make that transition? Like in a job setting, because you have if you're lucky enough that your company has a structure where you can be promoted or you learn some new skills and there is a career growth which you can see. Doing that by yourself, that would be very challenging if you're not disciplined, if you're not, if you can't plan for yourself that well. So what challenges have you faced, Shaurya, and what do you, like other guys, what do you think are the major challenges in going solo?
Okay, I think first things, like for you to go solo, I don't know if this is a challenge, but I'll say that the first thing that is really important is to have clarity, right? Clarity of mindset that this is exactly what I want is really important. Being self-aware and being able to answer that itself takes a lot. Just sort of coming to a point of self-awareness that this is what I want to do, this is how my life will go ahead, and this is something that I really crave for. First, accepting and understanding that itself is quite a journey. That was one of the, if I sort of a challenge or sort of like a journey for myself.
I actually had a question for you before I made my point, and that will probably help me make my point. Daria, do you think there was a risk associated with moving away from the corporate 9 to 5-ish structure?
Yeah. So the thing is, the obvious fear is that that I may not get a job again easily, right? Or I may not. First of all, I lose my income to begin with the day I leave my job, right? So the first big fear or the first hurdle is to first accept that I'm okay without income, without fixed income. Let's call it, right?
Mm-hmm.
First thing is just sort of accepting that much. Other risks that you really feel are, let's say, you're used to a sort of like a path when you're on a corporate career. You're used to the feeling of you going on a path with a lot of people. So whether it's a path of growth, whether it's a path of a career, there's a certain mindset that you feel comfortable with. I think one of the biggest feelings that I really was not expecting was I felt really lonely on my path.
Mm-hmm.
I felt isolated. I felt lonely. I felt, let's call it, I had a lack of an identity, is the term I'm looking for, when I initially started to just leave my job. So I think that feeling of isolation itself is something that I've taken some time to feel comfortable with, because I have to plan my day. I have to be my own boss. I have to push myself. I have to, make sure that, hey, if the money is not coming in, I got to tweak my techniques, my trades, my work accordingly. So being extremely sort of isolated and yet responsible for yourself is also a couple of things that I can mention.
My point, I guess, from
Yeah,
following yours was just that I guess you mentioned a lot of risks, and at some level, we acknowledge. There was an implicit acknowledgement in there that we are all privileged enough to be able to take those risks, right?
of course. Very,
Yeah,
very
so
well.
that is probably the point I was trying to make. That's probably the challenge I would say is the most I was thinking of.
I think the same thing. Like you said you felt lonely on the path when you switched from nine to
Yeah,
five to the alternative, and I think I would feel the same because even in my work, when I get to work with a team, I like going to office and meeting them and working with them. And when when we had to start working from home completely and you have to work alone and okay virtual meetings are there but I like meeting people and working, so I guess it depends a lot on I think what we want, because I can totally imagine it being really like feeling like you are doing it all alone
yeah,
in the alternative career, because you have to take care of everything, right? Not only the work, but I think marketing or strategy, or like you said, if there is loss or risk involved, you have to change your techniques and you have to understand the market and competition and growth.
yeah,
And alternatively, I think in a 9 to 5 job, not necessarily my job, in a 9 to 5 job, you're like everyone else. There's nothing difference. There's nothing, no difference between you and the other few people sitting next to you, or you can be replaced within a day or something. So for a, I think that is also a risk. I think in
yeah.
the long run. So it just depends on which one you are willing to take. Yeah, I am kind of, I can't think of like more bad points about one thing. I just think both of them have equally good points. It just depends on where a person is and what they're looking for. So yeah, right now I'm sticking to my job
Yeah,
because I don't think I don't have anything I want to work on right now
Mm,
more than my job, and plus I don't think I have discipline to take care of all the other things,
mm.
because once I get free time I'd spend it doing any random thing which suits my mood.
Yeah, just to add your point, right? So the thing is, when you're talking about that mindset, another sort of mindset, which one key aspect is sort of looking at uncertainty with a lot of excitement, right? I sort of like have had that in me, so it probably I could do it a little bit more easily. but it's really important at times to sort of face uncertainty with a level of calmness, right? Which maybe probably brings us to a point where is that sort of a individual path meant for everyone? Probably not, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, just wanted to just call that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of resilience is required. Like unless you are, your parents are extremely rich, you would need to you would need to earn, right? And to go,
Yeah,
if whatever you're selling or making or working,
yeah.
if it's not like, the suddenly it's become a boom, you'll need a lot of resilience to go
Yeah,
through all of it. Yeah, and it's, I mean, it's normal. Not many people have that. It takes time to build it, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And speaking of privilege, right? For example, yes, it
Mhm.
would. Privilege is also a big factor here, right? Because if you come from a background where you have the backing to experiment, right, through your parents backing you up or anybody else, of course, it becomes slightly easier. But I think,
Mhm.
like given the way the modern economy is, right, life is there are expenses. Life is not. You need to earn a significant amount of money for you to just survive. Rent rates are at their highest. Rent the percentage of your salary, average salary that goes into rent is at its highest historically. And various factors like that. So, and there are different degrees to which you can be privileged, right? So somebody would be like, hey, I can experiment for 5 years. Somebody could be, I can experiment for 1 year. Somebody could be like, hey, I just have 1 or 2 months. And if I'm not figuring things out in 1 or 2 months, I have to head back to my
Mhm.
job. So yes, there
Mhm.
are different degrees of privileges, but yes, it's good to have some backing, of course.
I have a question. Like, at
Yeah,
what point or at what level of preparedness were you, able to give up your job ready? Like, you were
yeah,
like, yes, I can definitely give it up right now, because I'm
yeah,
sure you would have started thinking about this alternative work much before you gave up your job.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, what was the point when you decided that, okay, when I reach this, I am ready to take the jump and the risk and go on with it,
Yeah.
and I
So
will succeed?
yeah, great question. Yeah, really good question. How do you like logically plan it out that I'm at a point to take the leap of faith, right? Yeah, this question has been such a personal question. Yeah, I just almost feel emotional when you say it. Anyway, so yeah, so the thing is, so it was 3 years of planning for me, right? I started in 2017. It has been 3 years of planning for the leap for me. I'm heavily inspired by the FIRE movement or Financial Independence Retire Early. It's a very US or American driven movement started in the 90s and something which millennials like us have picked up. So basically, it focuses on sort of saving up more and more and more money so that eventually you can sort of take a leap and sort of take that step towards doing something that you like, towards maybe taking a break, towards maybe just enjoying freedom in whatever sense freedom means. So for me, it was about sort of constantly calculating and planning how much money am I saving each month. I did that for 3 years. I was aiming at trying to save more than half my salary every single month. I've done that for 3 years and I gave myself a costing. I've focused on, first of all, reducing my costs each month down to a bare minimum. The other ability, if you look at the flip side, for you to be able to leave your job requires you to sort of minimize your costs because you can sort of live longer or let's say sort of experiment longer if you have more savings, right? So for me, it was can I save money worth of 2 years of bare minimum livings? And I calculate bare minimum livings as hey, can I just pay rent and can I just eat meals and can I just do bare minimum thing without getting into the numbers? Yeah. So I kept like a bare minimum, absolute like a fresher salary cost, if I may call it. Okay. Bare minimum cost. And I said, I can live in this much. First of all, I had to make changes to live within that much. Second, I wanted to save 2 years worth of this fresher bare minimum salary cost. And if I could do that much, 2.5 years, I thought that was good enough for me to take a leap of faith.
So you
Yeah.
already started preparing yourself, living that way, so that you can do it later on as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I started this started 3 years in advance to live in a manner where I live extremely frugally.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the lesser needs you have, the more freedom you have, I guess.
absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely.
so, coming to the final question for this episode, this requires a lot of planning, a lot of clarity, as you said, of
Yeah,
why I want to make that step, how would I prepare myself to get there, to what my future is going to look like. So I wanted to ask basically, where do you see yourself? Like the same question which a lot of people ask in the interview, where do you see yourself in the next 5-10 years and with the path you've chosen?
Yeah, so first thing is I lack the ability to see very much further. That's one of my biggest problems and biggest strengths at the same time. I see a lot, and I'm gonna like say this small instance, right? When I was in college, right, I used to see a lot of people saying, "Hey, I'm gonna study for my GRE, go give my masters, and then eventually aim for a PhD." And a lot of people have their life chalked out in years,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm such a guy who doesn't know how to see the next day even. So I sort of like I'm like, hey, I don't even know where I'm having lunch tomorrow. Okay, right? So just as an example, if I look at my life now, I can't look beyond the next 2 months, right? I only know what I'm doing the next 2 months. I'm absolutely clear what I want in my next 2 months. I can't look beyond that. But if I may give like an answer, I am trying to establish a business out of trading. I'm trying to create a movement of sorts where I can sort of, let's say, encourage more people to take the leap of faith based on my experiences, my learnings. And I wish to sort of create a blueprint where I can show people that there's an exact science for you to quit your job if you want to quit your job, for you to live a life where you don't need to be dependent on a corporation or somebody else to pay your income by using skills around analytics and trading a little bit, mostly how to use it in trading basically. So that's what I'm trying to promote from my side, and I wish to create that into a full-fledged business. It could be a movement, it could be a small service, but that's what my thought process is to. The plan for next month is to get a website.
Good to have that clarity.
Yeah.
Awesome. That was great. I think, Jyoti, do you have any questions?
No questions, but I mean, kudos to Shaurya for not only doing it, but also noting down his journey so that others might find it easier. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys, for this participation. This was a very interesting conversation. Like, we are all kind of, if I may say, stuck in a rat race, and sometimes we all plan to have a alternate lifestyle. And it takes a bit of, like, a lot of courage to make the switch, a lot of planning, as we discussed, and a lot of clarity as well why you are doing it. So once you have all these things sorted out, then you can finally make the transition into a life which you choose, and you can choose your own freedom. People would have different definitions of freedom, and that is also great. Like, as long as you're living by your own principles, if you're living true to yourself, you are free to call yourself free. And if you like this episode, please follow us on your favorite podcasting station and subscribe to us on YouTube. Thanks a lot, and see you in the next episode, in which we'll be talking about how relationships can make us better at risk taking. So stay tuned and see you in the next episode.